Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to take a detour. In my last video, I held up this guitar in a little clip that I played. I was telling the story when this camera decided it was going to totally have a mind of its own, and it still does, but I was telling the story about how this car saved my life. I did say I was going to put this on my second channel, but it is actually going to be on my first channel because I didn't think it was fair to you guys that I make you go to my second channel to hear about what this car had to do with saving my life. It's a work story. I have said that I wasn't going to say anything about my work, but as I told the story, I found that it was really kind of hard for you to understand what I was saying without at least knowing kind of what I did. I worked in an electronics manufacturer. We made bicycle trainers. A bicycle trainer, for those that aren't into cycling, they've been around. I mean, I go to garage sales with my wife all the time and see bike trainers. Our company was the first bike trainer. Back in 1976-ish, we invented a trainer that used squirrel cage fans. It was before I started working there. They were hot into making that when I got hired on. But I got hired on for the primary company, the parent company. The company was run by two people, the engineer boss, the other one, the pencil pusher boss. These two guys ran these two companies. One was an incorporation of the other. As a bike trainer, we went from squirrel cage fans creating wind resistance to being a computerized bike trainer that went through 5 or 6 software iterations. They all used software, some external software. The first was a Commodore 64 or an IBM XT computer, which was kind of one of the very first computers. Then it went to the old 8-bit Nintendo with the door you flipped up and you stick a cartridge in. And I tell a story about the Nintendo side of things a little bit within the story. Now you'll understand the context. Then we went to a Windows-based computer, kind of a copy of our old animation, which was just a couple of guys, you know, looking like they were sitting there riding their bicycle. The scenery was going by them, but, you know, there was very little interaction. You could draft in our software where you actually rode behind the other guy. You would not believe, or maybe you would, how much wind drag. When you push your car at 80 miles an hour versus 55, which was the old speed limit, and the reason they went down to 55 miles an hour had nothing to do with it. They wanted to keep you going faster. They knew back then that the amount of fuel you use, the faster you go, increases exponentially. I mean, the faster you push your body through air, the harder it gets to pedal, or the more fuel your engine takes to go faster. So, you know, having this draft feature was kind of cool. It actually made it easier so that when you got in a draft, this thing would make it easier to pedal. It would also, when you got to the bottom of a hill, did get harder to climb the hill. Very complex piece of equipment that throughout the years we made improvements to. That's what I'm kind of going to tell the story about and how it had its effect on me. The guitar, by the way, did get finished. It's actually a pretty nice little guitar. In case you were wondering, I did finish it. It actually has pretty decent sound. I'm way better than I can present it because I'm so rusty. I am so rusty. So anyway, I don't want to bore you with my music playing because it's not that good anymore, but so we're gonna leave that nightmare of me playing to very short stuff. So anyway, I'm going to break into my first attempt at recording this. At some point it transitions to where I was clamping this. That's the second attempt to record this, and I hope you stick through it because it'll explain who I am and why this car was so important to me at that point in time, and it's still important to me. This car, my wife has said I can never sell because it's the reason that I'm around for her. I'm not going to argue with her. Every time I say, this is my car, she says, whose car is that? It's your car. She basically has said, I can never sell the car. You know, I did sell a lot of cars. When I lost my job after 37 years, I was very rich in cars at the time and sold my wagon, sold my truck, sold this little blue hardtop that, everything you're seeing in this picture, I sold except for the Ranchero. I don't have any of those vehicles anymore because I kind of had to sell everything that I had. I sold everything except for my big tool chest here, and I think I had a drill press and stuff. I didn't have a garage, so I had to sell a bunch of stuff to make all of this happen. So anyway, there you go. So we'll see how this goes. I actually have a little guitar here that my wife picked up at a garage sale. It's got a couple of cracks in it. You can kind of see that it's held together with some duct tape. It's kind of a cool old guitar. It's called a Stadium Deluxe. I don't know if you can see that. There it is. It's got F-holes in it. The pick guard is got a little crack in it, but it'll probably super glue. Anyway, I'm going to work on this, but you're going to watch, and I'm going to talk about other stuff. I made a claim that it saved my life. And people have been asking, well, how did it save your life? What did it do? So that's kind of what I'm going to talk about while I'm working on the guitar. I do work on guitars, but I'm not a luthier. I do pretty good. My dad was a guitar player, so I learned a lot from him. I played guitar. I've been in bands since I was in my 20s, since I picked the guitar back up again. But anyway, I'm going to talk about how that car saved my life while I'm working on this guitar. The company I worked for 37 years went out of business in 2017. And along with, I better detune this. Strings are dead on this thing, totally. But I started working for the company. I'm not going to name names. Some of you will know where I worked, but where I worked is not important. I started working there when I was 19 years old. I was hired to sit at a drill press and drill the same holes over and over and over and over again. They had just gotten a big order, and so I was part of kind of a big hire. It was an electronics manufacturer, so they had a machine shop, they had tool shop, they had electronics, soldering, and all of that. I worked in the machine shop. My first real job was at an auto parts store, and I worked in that machine shop. So I had a pretty good understanding of machine tools and whatnot. I did that for about 6 months, and then somebody went around the company and they were asking all of the employees, mostly the guys, I suppose, whether or not they knew how to do any plumbing and electrical work. And I said, sure, I know how to do that. That's easy peasy stuff for me. I had never done it. No, I had done electrical work and plumbing on various cars growing up, but plumbing and electrical for buildings, had never done it. The way I looked at it, there was literally nothing that I ever set my sights on that I didn't accomplish. So I figured, I can do that. They had just acquired a new building, and they needed some plumbing and electrical. They needed the air lines run, to use compressed air. And my first task is to put some fluorescent lights up on the ceiling, which the first 10 I did wire wrong. I did eventually fix it, but what? You mean green isn't the power wire? Nope. It was in cars. Black was ground in cars, so I did black for ground in the first 10 lights that I put up at work. You electrical guys will go, okay. There were no jobs that I took that I didn't basically keep the entire time I was there. I just became like supervisor of that department after the fact. I mean, there was so much equipment that I built at the very beginning, only I kind of understood. I built some test machines that ended up going to some very large companies around the world. I built 9 of them. They cost us in 1980 about $50,000 a piece to build, something like that. You know, and here I was a 20-year-old, being tasked with making these things. There were computers on them. There was electrical stuff. I did mostly the assembly work on it, all of the plumbing layout, the structure of the thing. And it was during that period of time that I wasn't doing the mechanical maintenance, working on all the punch presses and the lathes and all that stuff that we had in the company. But then they hired another guy after me to do all that, and they paid him back then, I think they paid him almost $6 an hour. I know. But I was making $4.50 an hour doing the stuff I was doing. And after probably 6 months of that guy working there, he decided to go somewhere else. So he left. They basically said, well, it looks like to me, Roger, you know how to do that too, so we'll have you do what he was doing. Well, am I gonna get what he paid him? Well, no, well, we can't. If we did that for you, we'd have to do it for everybody. That was a fairly typical response anytime somebody went into the boss's office, which I'll also state from the very get-go here. We had 2 bosses. One was kind of our engineer guy, and the other was more the money management guy, the pencil pusher kind of guy, whereas the other guy he did most of, he designed everything that we made. I mean, he was a smart guy, no doubt about it. And so I kind of apprenticed under him. He showed me to do all kinds of stuff. And then about probably 3-4 years into it, the guy that was running the head guy for one of our divisions, the company made 2 different product lines, one completely unrelated to the other. But anyway, this other guy, he left, and they came to me and asked me if I wanted to also do his job. And so I became the service manager for that division of our company. That brought me into having to start talking to people on the phone, and I moved to writing the manuals for the products, which I never gave up. I never gave up the plant maintenance position. I was doing repairs on pieces of equipment that we had that I had built in the early 80s because nobody else knew how to do anything on it. Occasionally get the phone call to come to the production line to go fix on one of the things that I had made 25 years ago. I took on this position, and I took on this position, and I took on this position. I took them all on. I mean, by the time I left that place after 37 years, I probably had about 8 titles. I mean, my resume was just like, it was actually pretty hard to create. I took on production welding. I have a very bad back and a very bad neck, and I have zero doubts that a lot of my bad neck, it didn't have auto darkening back then. So I had a helmet that, flip it down and do my welds, lift it back up, put it in a new piece, and blah, 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 get it all set, and like this. I did that motion probably 100,000 times. I mean, there's zero doubt in my mind that it is a significant amount to do with the reason why my neck is the way my neck is, which is really bad. I'd show you a picture, but you might freak out and pass out, and then, that wouldn't be a good thing. This division that I took over eventually got pretty complex. It was originally just a mechanical thing. In 1986, they developed a fully computerized version of this thing that we were doing, and to do that they required a lot more technical documentation. For one, the pencil pusher boss, he would go out and tell everybody, that we're making these things, get it soon. What that basically did oftentimes is it caused people to stop buying our product until the new thing came out, or we promised that if you buy it now, we'll make that thing available for you. That didn't always work out really well. When that kind of stuff happened, generally it was then on me, and I don't know how come it was always on me, because I was a service manager. I don't know. We were going to make an addition to the product to not lose sales. We put it out without this feature, with the promise, we'll send you that when it was done. And as it turns out, I mean, it got way delayed. And customers all of a sudden were starting to reach out to us. Where's our promised product? I want a refund. And and I was given the responsibility to write them a very nice letter and tell them that we are so sorry. And I think out of all of that, mostly everybody was accepting that, yeah, we're working on it, as the programmers used to say. Yeah, I'll have it real soon now. I remember there was one guy, he was not going to take the "I'm sorry it's delayed." I mean, he actually did threaten to, take us to court, bait and switch and all that kind of stuff. I think we ended up giving him a full refund. Oh, look at that. Let's tape over the cracks. Just in case you're wondering what I'm doing here, I'm pulling off tape that's holding the guitar together. So how much it comes apart, I do not know. I did end up getting that update, but I became the new PR guy, which meant that when the bosses said that something was going to happen and it didn't happen, I was the guy that was always the one communicating to the customers why it didn't get done and when was it going to get done. That continued all the way to the very end. In about 2000, the product was going to make another big change. They had contracted with a guy that had worked with Disney, a Disney Imagineering guy. He's pretty well known. He promised that he was going to make an update for our product, and he was going to make the software look more three-dimensional, so 3D software. And of course, pencil pusher boss guy, we went to trade shows, so you had to have something at the trade shows to make people come and stop at your booth. So they did all this 3D coming soon, and people would be coming into the booth and go, "Oh wow, that's going to be really cool." I remember a comic that I pulled out, but it was a Dilbert, and basically he's there in a conference and the guy's up there talking about software, and he says, and we're going to have this here, we're going to do that there, and we're going to have that there, and he goes on a little bit, and then people are going to say, "I got to get me some of that." That was my life, is that constantly telling people that, yeah, we're going to get it pretty soon, or that update will come out really soon. And I kid you not, to the very end, we never got anything out when we said we were going to get it out. So in about 2001, we're doing this 3D stuff, and that guy finally shows up. We're all out there by our device connected up to a computer, and he's showing it off, and he's describing everything he's done, and I'm sitting there thinking to myself, no, I did probably say that at the time. It's like, man, here we go again. I mean, the software we had prior was more two-dimensional, but it did what it needed to do, and so the goal was to make it, but in more of a 3D fashion. These guys were somehow thinking that this was going to be okay. I mean, not only was it going to be 3D, it was going to require a special video card being put into the computer. It was an added expense. And so we were going to charge like $250 for something that did a tenth of what the original software did, but it was 3D. It was going to be awesome. I mean, the computer would literally bog down and stall. People were used to being able to ride 100 miles using this product. And this thing, if you were lucky to get a course built that was 10 miles long, you were lucky. For the most part, everybody complained. They called it eye candy. People who paid their $250 plus having to buy this special video card to even make it work. And of course, guess who was on the front lines having to defend? I mean, you have to toe the company line, and it was really hard for me to do. Lying to people, or let's be nice about, we were obfuscating the truth behind all of this stuff. I did my best over the years to both confront the powers that be. By the way, I've got props now, since I had 3 days to fix this. This is the engineer boss, and this here's the pencil pusher boss. He's the one that always went to the trade shows and says, we gotta say what's in. And he's the one that basically, sat in his office, and he'd occasionally come up with some new thing that we were going to make. His connection with this 3D guy was pretty good. I mean, he really liked him. He felt he was a smart guy, and he was a smart guy. He was a smart graphics guy, and I would consider him a smart guy in general. I mean, I got to know him pretty well, but the understanding of what the customer might want in our business model and what he was able to produce in the time that he had. And he wasn't a software guy. I mean, that's just it. He worked doing a lot of the graphic type stuff. The actual software, he kind of learned it on the fly. It was all kind of cutting edge stuff at the time too, but it didn't really help us. Again, we'll fast forward from that old timeline. He decided to hand it off to a good friend of his. Ironically, this little software development group, they were pretty tight with each other. They all communicated externally from anything that these two bosses knew, even though this boss knew some of the people that knew this person, who that's how he gotten hold of this, 3D guy in the first place. But their inside clique all knew each other. The pencil pusher boss and I flew down to California to meet with these guys and to talk about their work, and fairly productive meeting. I thought. I mean, they really looked like they could do something for us, and so we contracted with them. I wasn't involved in any of the contract negotiations. I was just there as the software development guy. I knew the ins and outs of our software more than anybody. It made only sense that I was there. Of course, this guy didn't go down. He and I had an argument once where he was talking about calculators, how they were making all of these really fancy calculators, but the reality is everybody still buys the most simple calculators. And he used it, he drove Mercedes-Benz cars, and he swore that the 70s, early 80s Mercedes-Benz was a classic design, and he somehow believed that shape and design of the Mercedes, but he swore that they will never change. And of course they did. His mindset had always been our hardware was perfect with no need to improve it. Time marches on. The customer base was really starting to get antsy. We've released this new 3D software and it sucked. And our customer base was starting to have doubts about it. So in my mind, meeting with this new programmer group and the level of just basic understanding that they presented, just in light of the amount of information they gained from us and from dealing with the other guy, the main guy, who is a really smart guy. I didn't draw a picture of him. I probably should have, and this will come into play. He did not like him. There was a time when we were first looking into doing the 3D software, we reached out to a developer who came into the office, and they had a meeting with him. At the end of that meeting, had decided they would give that developer all of our intellectual property, for the most part, that made our current software communicate with our hardware. Interface protocols, the handshake that takes place between a piece of software and a piece of hardware that makes the thing work. And they gave them all of that stuff. This developer, they gave him all of that stuff. And gosh, I don't even think it was more than 2 months later, we heard back from the guy that he was developing software, but he wasn't developing just for us. I don't have to just make it for your stuff. I'm going to make it for everybody's thing, and he decided to just kind of run it with it on himself. And now these guys didn't have him sign a non-disclosure. They didn't have him sign a real contract. It was a handshake kind of thing, and that kind of freaked this guy out. How it's like, how could this be? It's like, But I remember that, and I think it was at that point in time, something went in this guy's head. I started to see a paranoia begin in relationship to working with anybody outside the company. Once the 3D guy brought this other guy on, and then that guy got to know that guy and didn't like that guy, even though they were working for us, and the Disney guy liked the programmer that he got to us and didn't understand what we had problems with the guy. That new development team created a fairly nice piece of software. It fixed all of the issues that the Disney guy had created for us, but it lacked some polish, and it was kind of at the end of that coming out, and it did appease a lot of our customers. We just called it version 2. It was at that point in time pretty much all development stopped for the longest period. We just kind of sat on that and sat on that and sat on that, and in the midst of it we were trying to get some other stuff done. I got together with our in-house programmer and the programmer who did a lot of the work for us. He did our earlier version of the software, 2D stuff. We met, he was the one who lived out of town, was coming into town, and I got invited, and the next thing I know, I'm coming back to work after that meeting. That guy was staring at me like I had done the unforgivable thing, whatever that is. Because I remember him walking into his office, and as we were having a conversation, and he walked into his office, "Why are you mad at me for getting together?" I just could not understand. All of a sudden I was the bad guy. He walked into his office in the middle of a conversation and slammed the door in my face. And it just like, I cannot believe this just happened, And it was at that was kind of like the beginning of the end of my relationship with him. I don't know if I've explained this, but I did so much for this guy, taking care of his house when they were away, and he taught me so much too. I don't know exactly what it was that caused me to be the bad guy, but I was all of a sudden. And, we kind of got over that, and things were okay. Went in and talked to him, and he apologized to me, I apologized to him, and things were kind of hunky-dory there for a while. 8 more years took place, and the pencil pusher boss came into my office, and he said, "Do you still have the contact information for the people that did our software?" And, well, yeah, I'm sure I do. I said, I can reach out to him. Well, what would you? He says, we pay them X amount in royalties every month. And, it seemed to me that it would be in their best interest to improve, the software, because it needed to be. We had just had a guy from Microsoft who, he was a customer of ours, but he worked at Microsoft. I think it was more in the software architecture type thing. I don't think he did actual coding for the most part. He had access to the bug reports. Anytime something crashes on your Windows computer, which we were only Windows, if the software crashed, would you like to send a note to Microsoft? You could hit yes or no. Well, he would get all of those yes reports, who was running what operating system, what software was running, what was, it sends a pretty complete report off to Microsoft for them to improve Windows if something had to do with their operating system. But for the most part, this guy came back, he says, we get a lot of reports from a lot of pieces of software. I go, but the number of crashes that were occurring that were getting sent to Microsoft for a product that he was interested in was pretty high. And he convinced the pencil pusher guy that, something really needed to get done. So the pencil pusher guy and I are having this conversation, and he tells me, to reach out to him. So I reach out to him. Oh, yeah. I said, does this thing still work? It was the program that we had used to communicate, online program management system. And, I said, is this still working? Are you guys still there? And the reply was, of course we're still here. Where do you think we'd go? And I said, well, the pencil pusher boss is kind of interested to see if you're interested in doing some more work for us. And of course they said, sure. They didn't have any reason. I mean, they were making money from us and everything. It was not long after that, after I had, kind of got him in touch with him. This guy didn't ask me nothing. So I'm working with this guy. He's the one that asked me the questions. I get him in touch and all is well and good, I think. And it comes time to that time of the year. It's like, I would always take like 3 weeks off, save up my vacation. We get 3 weeks a year, even though I had hundreds of hours of vacation. But, I'd kind of gotten into the habit as my parents were getting older. I'd go down and spend, a week with my mom, a week and a half with my dad, and then another, whatever the remaining time is, I would drive back to my mom because she was halfway between there and my dad. And I remember being down at my dad's and I'm getting a phone call from the pencil pusher boss who's asking me, do you have the phone number of the programmer? The engineer boss wants to talk to him. And I'm thinking, why does he want to talk to him? It didn't make any sense to me, but you do what your bosses say. So I said, yeah, here's his. And I gave him the information. And then I come back from this vacation after 3 weeks is up. And this guy is giving me stink eye. And I'm like, what do I do now? And he would not talk to me. I mean, I tried to figure out what the heck was going on. He wouldn't tell me anything. Kind of get a little bit feedback from the programmers group. Is like, yeah, your boss contacted our programmer, which is kind of like overstepping the general. Chain of command got broken, and that really kind of messed with them. He was trying to get information from the programmer that had more to do with, it'd be like somebody coming to me to ask me something about my boss. I was like, I don't do that kind of stuff. I mean, that's not how it's done. You don't do that. But of course, the programmer and that guy have more to do with each other. I mean, if somebody came to me and told me that they wanted me to talk about my boss, it would be more apt for me to say no and then go to that boss and say, hey, this guy said that he wanted to find out. I don't know what it's all about. And that's what they did. But they reached out to me. It's like, why is your boss contacting the programmer and trying to get information that the programmer, it wasn't his to give? Slowly starting to get, an understanding now of why this guy was giving me stink eye. But I didn't know why until one of my three, I almost always had 3 guys working in our department, me and 2 other guys. And one of the guys was out walking. He commented to this guy, what's up with you and Roger? And he said that I convinced him to go behind his back to reach out to these programmers. And I'm like, really? Is that what his deal is? Which wasn't true. I mean, this guy had asked me, if I had their contact information, and I provided it to him. Sure, we had conversations, for years about doing software updates, and it was always my suggestion that, we had a team that knew everything about the software. We should maybe reach out to them, but it was never in my mind that these 2 should never talk about the business. That wasn't my place, but it was my place, and I had done so for many, many, many years, to say that our software sucked in a lot of ways because we didn't keep it up to date. We would come out with a version and we would ride that version forever. We did it with the very first version of our software, which did not operate on a Windows computer. It operated on an old Nintendo machine. And we kept that thing going for 8 years after the Nintendo machine went off the market. It was just like, we were buying used Nintendo machines and, buying them from warehouses, insanity, the kind of stuff that we did to kind of keep old crap running, mainly because we really didn't have any competition. And now we were coming into a place in our line of business where we were starting to see some people, eke into and create stuff that they were competing against us. And this guy's mindset is, we are the best, there's no way, our physics, it's like, yeah, that's great, and that's true, But they don't want stuff that they plug it in, stuff crashes. I mean, they want something that's just gonna give them 2 + 2 = 4, because that's what they wanted. It doesn't mean that the thing can't get complex. This is that the complexity of it shouldn't be crashing your computer, or it shouldn't be lacking features or whatever, you know. This is where things kind of got really rough there, and it was at that point in time I found myself smack dab in the middle of these two guys. You know, this guy talking to me, this guy not talking to me, this guy believing that I'm against him for getting him to go behind his back, which I didn't do. And there was nothing I could do about it. This guy, he was right, and it was pretty clear to me that this guy didn't offer up his side of the story in a way that convinced him that I wasn't the bad guy. You know, like I said, this guy, after that little in-house programmer thing, there's a switch that once it trips. I remember somebody sold a pair of pipe dies. A pipe die is something that cuts the threads. This guy had sold a pair of pipe dies, his favorite pipe dies, I guess. But that guy that sold those things, thinking that they're not needed anymore. I mean, it was a part of a product that we had years before, and so he sold them off, and this guy banned him from the tool shop, and you know, it was almost, I don't know, 2 years that guy held a grudge over selling a pair of pipe dies. It's like, so I mean, I didn't hold out too much hope for myself. I mean, that's kind of what I'm getting at here, at this guy ever putting himself into the place of admitting that he's in the wrong. I mean, I seriously contemplated a lot of stuff back then. I mean, here I was into my 30th plus year. It's right at my 30th year working there, and I saw those 30 years that I dedicated to the company. I was now kind of the bane of his existence for reasons I really don't know. Anyway, it really did have a significant negative effect on me, what he was doing, and it really did start to take its toll after, you know, having worked there for those 30 years and having it all seemingly being, I mean, I was really doing my best, I felt, to save this company, because I dealt with everybody outside the company. He dealt with the people that worked in the company. He dealt with people outside the company, and he knew, he had a good sense that we needed to do stuff, but he had to convince this guy to do it. And I assumed if I'm the one, I'm being tasked with doing stuff, then they are on the same page. But clearly they weren't, and I couldn't get him, or, you know, I couldn't get him to back me, I guess. And I couldn't talk to this guy. So, you know, I was like, damn it, what do I do? You know, there was a part of me at that point in time, I really seriously, you know, thought, this ain't worth it, you know? I mean, here I was getting into my 50s. You know, I'd given them the best 30 years of my life, you know, from 20 till 50. And I'm like, well, what am I going to do now? You know? And I had chose, because many people have asked me, why didn't you just quit? Why didn't you go somewhere else? It's like, you climb this ladder for 30 years, and then what are you supposed to do? You know? Just, okay, well, I'll go somewhere and work for half of what I was making. I mean, I sat long and I sat hard thinking about what I should and shouldn't do. A part of me does what it always does. Puts his head down, and I found me something to build. And so I decided to build myself a car. I mean, I didn't need a car. I didn't. But I needed something. I needed something because the days and the hours were long at work. And I would just get home and I'd sit on the couch and just fume about what was going on. I mean, at that point in time, I was already starting to suffer significant back and neck stuff. I hadn't gone anywhere to diagnose it, but I was always so busy. So I felt maybe some car yoga would help, and it helped me from committing suicide. I was seriously depressed. I just couldn't believe, after everything I had done at that place, all the fingers in the pies, the dedication, and the loyalty that I put long hours in at home and on the road and everything else, to have this guy turn around and take a dump on me. That's the way I looked at it. I really could not believe. So I built the Ranchero, and during the, it didn't last long enough. Literally after I finished the Ranchero, I kind of had to just keep doing stuff on it to stop. I would just take on other projects. And I met my girlfriend. What a blessing that was, because she kind of gave me another reason to live. Great gal. She allows me to get into whatever trouble out here that I want to get in trouble doing. You can't ask for anything more than that in life. The story doesn't end there. We're in the midst of this software development. This guy's being a dick. This guy's like, we'll get, he would constantly come up, I guess we'll have to just do something else. I'm like, wait a minute. We've told everybody in the world that we're doing this, and now you're going to, he'd reach out to this other guy and have him start doing something that was just totally unrelated. Like, if we put this out there, maybe they won't notice that we didn't do the other thing. And that's kind of where everything always fell on me, because, he would talk to people in the world, but I was the guy talking to the people in the world. Our customers, not just the guys that we wanted to sponsor. We sponsored a lot of athletes. God, I'm sorry, I got to stand up. But we did sponsor a lot of people. And they talked to him, because for him it was all marketing. He was the marketing manager as well. So, all the advertising and everything we did, the pencil pusher guy did. Until kind of the very end, where this guy decided, because we weren't getting all that other stuff, because we didn't. Somewhere along the line, it got out. I was talking about the clique of those programmers here earlier. It got out. This guy called one of them and was talking bad about the guy who was doing work for us. And that guy that he talked to said, hey, that guy is actually bad-mouthing you. And the programmer was just like, what? I'm working for them. Why would he be... he knew there was a love lost there. He did. He had actually said to probably this guy, the pencil pusher guy, that, the only reason that they were doing our software after all of that was because they liked working with me. That probably didn't help my relationship here. It was kind of the deal breaker, I guess. It was at that point in time, there was a time period where the software developer was kind of embroiled in a lawsuit. Not because he brought it on, but because somebody who was another one of his clients had contracted with them to improve that program management software that I reached out to them. What do you mean? Of course it works. They had worked with this other client to improve that software, and that client paid them a lot of money to do that development work, which I have to admit, it was a major improvement from the time I'd seen it, years earlier. He kind of had to drop what he was doing for us for quite some time to, for all intents and purposes, fight the U.S. government over information. We want all of your information. And he's like, what do you mean you want all of our information? He says, we want everything on that server. He says, no, I'm not going to give you everything on that server. I'll give you the information on that server that's related to your case, but I'm not going to give you everything, like, everything about our business. They don't need to know about our business. It had nothing to do with the case. So anyway, he really did kind of put up a fight. He won, thankfully. But anyhow, I think it was during that time period where we weren't getting anything from them, and there was, this dangling participle of we're having to fight. I was having to fight, but the pencil pusher guy was. This guy wasn't. He was sitting in his office twiddling his thumbs, doing whatever he was doing with his brain. Guys fighting to keep the company innovative enough to stay in the lead, which we had for 25 years. Bringing this up again does tend to rile me a bit. So, needless to say, it was during that 2-year time period that he got all upset about we not getting our stuff. And of course, I was upset too, and our customers were upset, mostly within the forum. I mean, we would get phone calls too. I mean, there was this one guy, oh my gosh, he would call. He was so upset. But mostly he was upset because there were some hardware things that we could have done, should have done. And there were. I mean, at the time of our demise, and I stuck it out to the very end, we did start seeing some competition. Couple of fairly big companies with, I think, Chinese backing, but who knows? They started producing some product that starting to give us some run for our money. And this guy's decision at that point in time was to hire his kids, which they were smart kids. I mean, I had no ifs, ands, or buts about that. I mean, he was smart. Their kids were smart. I mean, I worked with them both. No complaints about that. But they were his kids. So, they would take dad's side and so much of this stuff. And it also put me in a weird place because I was working with them within the company, but I had to just walk on eggshells, wherever that phrase came from, I don't know. But, around them, because I didn't want to come across to them as though what was happening between us was a thing. I mean, maybe they knew it was a thing. I don't know. But, it was just one of those, just another thing really did make things bad. Of course, this had already been built, I'm well past that. At this point in time, I am just trying to save the company, but at the same time, knowing we are not going to survive. Probably a good 5 years before it actually happened, I really got smart about putting money in my 401k and saving money. And a lot of it was because I started dating my wife, Lila. She was smart. She's pretty smart when it comes to investing and all that. She basically told, oh, you should be doing this, you should be doing that. And so I started doing all of this and doing all of that. And thankfully, because when the end finally came, after we never got the software done, I mean, we tried. I mean, these guys basically walked away. Once word got out that, he was talking bad about them behind us, they said, why are we doing this? I mean, we like you, Roger, but, we're sorry. They try to develop it, kind of keep some stuff going with a couple other guys. And, they had started, just, again, another side project because people said that they wanted, Wi-Fi, the whole Wi-Fi interface. They were tired of plugging cables into stuff without me being involved because he didn't work with me, but he kind of said that they needed to do this. And so they all started working on this thing without really my involvement until it got time to the place where, it was getting close to where at least they thought it was ready for prime time, and all of a sudden I'm being handed this thing to test. We need you to test this, Roger, and see if it's going to work. If you can make it work, everything will. And I looked at this and I said to myself, you got to be effing crazy. I mean, it was the most this thing that they developed, which was supposed to be Wi-Fi. I mean, they were wanting people to come up with IP addresses by, oh my God, it was just the only thing I could say. There is no way on earth our customers, who are just cyclists, that they were going to sit down and figure this out. I mean, to me, it's just totally reminiscent of back when we came out with that first 3D software that required the special video card that people had to get into their computers and put in this video card and configure it. And it was like, oh my God, I just saw there is no way that this is ready for prime time. I mean, and however it worked out, you know, I convinced at least this guy, because I wasn't talking to that guy. I convinced this guy there is no way. He said, well, you know, well, we'll start working on it, and you know, and so it basically went back almost to the drawing board. We had to have it in the software and in our hardware. So the software was abandoned by this development team, and we hired a Pakistani guy to come in. I mean, we hired some of these other developers who we'd worked with, you know, they had their own software stuff that interfaced with ours because of that other guy who, you know, let stuff out. Initially gave that guy the heebie-jeebies and the paranoia complex. I mean, it was such a complex piece of software in the end with what, you know, it was supposedly taking all of the software that we had developed that were being used individually by people and putting them all into one thing. So you'd launch one piece of software and, you know, if you wanted to do this, you could do it. If you wanted to do that, you could do it. I mean, it was just all there. And plus we had another product line that it was going to use. So, I mean, it was, you know, instead of having 10 pieces of software that we couldn't update, we'd have one piece of software that we could maybe keep up to date. When software needed to get upgraded, it was all in one place instead of 10 different places. I mean, it really was what we had come to, but it didn't get done. So we had this Wi-Fi thing that people are trying to figure out how to make the software work and the hardware handshake and all of that stuff. And that's where we were when I got called into my boss's office after however many months of that without it getting any further. And then the ultimate nail in the coffin is once we got to the place that we realized that our hardware was going to have to change, but we had promised, if we had done that thing like I mentioned earlier where, you know, we put something out and, you know, we had to totally change the hardware. And to make that change in hardware was going to cost us a lot of money because we had let the cat out of the bag and, you know, had a whole 2 years worth of sales with that in mind and promising the customer base that you would get it. And then they were talking about, well, maybe we should charge them for it. And how much should we charge them for it? And it's like, oh gosh. And, you know, I'm thinking back to me writing the letters out to people. But anyhow, we didn't get that far. You know, the pencil pusher boss called me in and sat me down. He goes, we're going to have to, we've made the decision that we're going to close that half of the business that I was manager of. But he then spent the next 30 minutes saying stuff like, well, you know, you can do this tech support for it. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I do the tech support for it now. But then it kind of got to the place where he was like, well, you know, no. He didn't say it. In the whole 30 minutes we were there, he never once came in and said, yeah, we're going to have to let you go, Raj. It didn't surprise me. It really didn't. It was shocking, I'll have to tell you. Because that was the end of 37 years fighting. I mean, literally fighting the last quarter of it, pretty much. You know, they gave me 30 days. I could have stayed on 30 days. I think I lasted 3 days and finally told them, you know, I just can't continue to go through this day after day after day for 30 days knowing that I tried. I mean, what am I going to... You know, and you're going to announce to the world that the company's closing. And I don't want to be the one to explain that to them. I mean, that was really kind of what was going through my mind. It's just like, I have done this long enough. This is yours to explain now. So I basically just grabbed my stuff. And the pencil pusher guy, he fully understood. I mean, I could tell just in our 30 minutes, he didn't want to tell me that he was letting me go because he kind of did know everything I did. We had a conversation once where he and I were sitting at a dinner table and I had gone from hourly to salaried. They said, well, you know, you're part of management. You really should be salaried and, you know, not on the clock. But then I was sitting there telling him at the dinner, I said, you know, I've sat and figured out the number of hours that I've worked since I went to salary and the amount that I got paid. now that I've gone to salary, I go, I've lost thousands of dollars, because I can't not do what is necessary. I mean, you call me on the weekend. I was still putting in 80-hour weeks that I used to get paid for, and now I'm only getting paid for 40. Once I explained this to him, he did tell me that night. I said, yeah, well, that isn't right. I kind of kept track of it because it was kind of a thing, it was evident to me when I got my first paycheck. It was like, oh my God, I'm going to keep track of this. And so I kept track of it. They couldn't give it to me all at the same time, so they put it on my vacation. I left after 3 days, and because they owed me so much, they kept me on the payroll for almost 3 months as they slowly paid me off because they were hurting for cash. I had heard through the grapevine before they even called me into the office is that they were burning through cash like crazy. We had had a recall that cost us a lot of money. Yeah, so it was kind of a perfect storm that occurred that caused it all to kind of dissolve. I didn't go back to work again. I had started dating Lila, and she and I were really getting close to the place I was going to ask her to marry me. And now, I did. It's like, will you marry a guy that isn't employed? She said yes. I sold my house that's 30 miles north of here, built this garage, which was another ordeal in and of itself for another time maybe. But yeah, I built the garage, outfitted it. We garage sale, estate sale. So pretty much everything that I have in here as far as tools, picked up at garage and estate sales. I kind of have all of the stuff. And that was the other part, staying there as long as I did. They had everything that I needed. I mean, if I needed to machine something, I had a machine shop I could use. It was worth putting on the blinders, ignoring this, and just plowing ahead. I could do it for as long as I needed to. I did get a lot of flack. In fact, after the company closed, there was a guy that he used to call in all the time because that was his thing. He had kind of lumped me with these guys as the reason things weren't happening. I mean, I was fighting to get stuff done all of the time because we worked with the customers. We knew the things that were breaking, the things that customers were having problems with. We knew the things, me and my 2 other guys, whoever they were at the time. I don't have any regrets. Thankful I didn't take my life over all of that. Although, the thought did cross my mind. I found it very hard to see then the character building that it was doing within me. I think where I'll leave this, I want to thank you for being here. Hit the like, hit the subscribe, comment. Have you had a similar experience? How did you deal with it? I mean, that would be great to hear from people that maybe were on the edge of doing something and they found something that, pulled them out of it. I mean, the world is full of people hurt, and there's hurt that's put on at no fault of their own. It's just because somebody, decides they're going to be passive aggressive. I mean, that's really what it is. And you've pulled yourself out. Maybe you have something to say about it. So as long as I'm on this side of the ground, I'll reply. All right. So appreciate it. Have a good one. Thank you. Have a great day.